nations. The second one was with respect to languages, an AI IP component, more or less. So looking at also across cutting and multidisciplinary approach in terms of how we look at AI with relation to intellectual property, and also how that is influencing the growth of AI governance structures. So this particular last one will be looking at a more holistic and multidisciplinary approach with respect to how we are looking at AI governance in the continent, how it's evolving, and then looking at it from a key focus from the African perspective, the Kenyan perspective more specifically, and from within the East African region. So with us is an amazing line of panelists who will enable us to sort of look at this particular discussion from different components, looking at it from AI governance from a local governance perspective, and a slightly more sectoral perspective, which is the judiciary, and then the correlation between AI governance and data governance. So to kick us off, allow me to share my screen so that we can commence with a brief highlight of what the actual AI governance landscape in the continent actually looks like, and see what changes have happened over the years, or rather over this particular year. Let me know once my screen is visible, just show of hands. Yeah. Perfect, thank you. So once again, we are basically going to be looking at the evolving AI governance landscape in Africa, but taking a more multidisciplinary approach in terms of how we are looking at it. So what does the AI governance landscape look like currently, or what is it being characterized by? So the AI governance landscape is currently characterized by an increase in national AI strategies. We are seeing more and more countries coming up with their respective national AI strategies, setting out an outline of where AI is placed within their particular countries at a national level. More holistically, at a regional level, we are seeing the fact that the launch of the AU AI strategy last year also set a tone of how AI is being perceived and being leveraged. What are the key priority areas in terms of either advancing it in terms of advancing the economy, aligning the same with the Agenda 2063, and how that is supposed to trickle down in terms of creating a more harmonized approach in terms of how we are thinking about AI within the African continent, and then how that's the same trickles down at national levels. So we are also seeing the fact that foundational laws are forming a significant part of what the AI governance structures look like. When I say foundational laws here, I'm referring to your data protection laws, your computer misuse and cybercrime laws, your consumer protection acts, your intellectual property acts, and other subsidiary legislations, I would call them, is what you're categorizing as foundational laws. So the Data Protection Act, more specifically, as it has been developed across various African nations at a larger scale right now, is what we are seeing has sort of advanced thinking about how the AI governance landscape is evolving with respect to how data is being used, personal data, but we are also seeing elements of thinking about beyond personal data. What about the non-personal data, a component of it that significantly goes into building AI systems and AI technology? And with those particular parameters, we are seeing the need to correlate this to readiness in terms of looking at what the existing infrastructure looks like to enable us to leverage artificial intelligence, not only on a continental basis, but on a national basis. There are specific steps that are going into building the digital infrastructure at different national levels, as well as regionally, which we are also seeing to an extent will inform and influence how AI governance structures are built and look like. So brief mapping of it with respect to policy. So we are seeing quite a number of countries that have their AI strategies from this particular mapping. So this is derived from the latest State of AI Policy in Africa report. We are seeing very many countries with published AI strategies. So far we have 12 countries with published AI strategies. There are those who are within the draft stages of the AI strategy. some within the draft stages of AI policy. We also seen countries that have already done the AI readiness impact assessments. And we're also seeing countries that have the draft AI action plans. So Kenya also added to the list, of course, early this year when it published its national AI strategy in early March. And we're also seeing that we are at the inception stages of doing the AI policy framework in tandem with the development of the data governance policy framework for the country. So looking at it in terms of that particular mapping and considerations that are being made in terms of looking at how we are regulating artificial intelligence or whether there's a need to regulate artificial intelligence, we then draw to the fact that what are the processes that are being taken towards establishing these particular governance structures, either at a continental level or at a country-based or national levels. And this is why we say, let's look at it from a sort of multidisciplinary approach, because ultimately AI is broad and it has wide impact that cuts across different sectors, be it in government, be it in private sector. We're also seeing that AI governance is not only about technology. At the end of the day, we are always called to remember that AI is in fact a tool and that it influences and impacts different people and institutions. So its impact will be felt based on how it is going to ultimately be leveraged and be used by the people. Then with respect to that is trying to figure out if we are developing regulatory mechanisms, building governance structures, are we able to identify specific policy gaps or blind spots that may come up? Are we able to also apply a bit of foresight when we're developing these policies? We also look at it in terms of the direct correlation with AI and data. So AI governance structures existing as of themselves and data governance structures existing as of themselves, in as much as they're interconnected and correlated and can't necessarily be separated from each other, because data forms a distinctive part and a distinctive element of how AI is actually created. Then we look at it in terms of building legitimacy, trust, and public buy-in, more specifically in terms of building public trust. If there's no legitimacy with respect to how we are looking at our governance structures or how we are building them, or building them with the people in mind, there's likely to be less public trust, not only with respect to how we are leveraging artificial intelligence, but there needs to be also it being considered within for the people in terms of how are they deriving redress mechanisms. That also needs to exist within the governance structure so that there is that specific public buy-in. Then when we look at it in terms of actual implementation, so one thing that is noted across the board is that regionally and as well as nationally, we come up with very robust regulatory frameworks and policy frameworks. But the crux of it comes in terms of implementation. How well can we implement the specific frameworks and policies that we've actually developed? And this comes across with the fact that there needs to be coordination across different institutions and institutionalization of these frameworks and policies to enable them to be fully and effectively implemented. Last but not least, AI technology is often evolving faster than policy interventions can actually catch up. So when we think about it in that perspective, how can we feed into looking at it from a multidisciplinary approach, also within, so to speak, a multi-stakeholder approach, to enable us to build the dynamic of how AI governance structures are being built and evolving throughout the continent and on a national basis. And with those few remarks and outlay of it, let's actually have a discussion about it. So with that, I would like to introduce our amazing panelists for today. A special note to our panelists, they form part of the first cohort of our AI Policy Fellowship. So we'll be facilitators as well as the fellows themselves, and I will allow them to introduce themselves as they will have quite broad insight to give as we go out through this webinar. So karibuni sana. So allow me to present my panelists. We will start with Dr. Nelly Rotich.
Thank you so much, Florence. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Nelly.
Yeah, thank you. So Florence, you initially mentioned that CPIT has 4 departments, and one of the departments that you identified is the data governance department. So that is the department that I lead. So my name is Dr. Nelly Rotich, and I'm a research fellow at CPIT, where I lead the data governance department. I oversee, research works relating to data governance as it relates to all emerging technologies, including AI. And I'm very happy to be here, Florence. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Nelly. Next, we will have Yvonne Dirangu.
Thank you very much, Florence. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. We can see you and we can hear you.
All right, thank you very much. I think you must have shared, I must have shared my brief screen with you on what I am. So my name is Yvonne Joki, and I head the Legal Services Department at the Moranga County Assembly. And for those of you who understand how devolved structures work, I mean the assembly setup, but as well as I do a lot of things with the Moranga County government. So I am also an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, like Dr. Nelly. And my specialty now is public policy, and a lot of it, and legislative drafting, and a lot of it I'm doing currently with the Moranga County. I'm involved in pioneer policy and legislative initiatives that are very alive to technology and development, and very happy to be here and share my insights from a devolved government setup and how we are embracing AI and how it's working for us.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Yvonne. And next we will have Stella Mulunji.
Yes, can you hear me? Good afternoon, and thanks, Florence, for having me, and the team, of course. So my name is Stella Murungi, and I'm the Chief Digital Officer for the Justice Sector in Rwanda. So I'm here representing East Africa, at least, not just Kenya. So yeah, and from Rwanda, I think it's mostly I deal with the justice sector, so the entire Rwanda justice chain, all the way, be it criminal or civil justice chain. So mostly in digital transformation. I'm not a lawyer, I'm into tech. So digital transformation of our justice sector. So everything around making sure that we adhere to the evolving, be it AI, so emerging technologies, but also existing technologies that help us in justice delivery. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Stella. So I will go right into it, and let's basically just have a discussion on what this looks like. So we'll have a deep dive session, and then we will have a question and answer session at the end. For the participants, please feel free to utilize the chat section or the discussion button for any questions you might have throughout these particular sessions and the webinar. So to begin, we will begin looking at it from a more or less a data perspective, and basing it on the fact that AI leverages on data. And this specifically goes to Nelly to begin with, because this is where predominantly most of her research is structured at, in asking, based on what you are seeing and based on the work that has been done in the course of the year, what are the most critical data governance elements that are informing AI governance structures, generally speaking, and more holistically in terms of a local and regional perspective?
Thank you, Florence. I think I want to start by just highlighting some of the things that you kind of brought up in your presentation. You started off by highlighting what is the landscape in Africa in terms of how do we regulate AI as far as it has developed at the moment in the continent, which is, for me, quite an insightful presentation, and it's something that I also want to just base some of my discussions on. You would see that there's a lot of disparities within the continent in terms of just regulating AI, and from the AI perspective, as you pointed out, we have both policies and strategies which are soft laws in themselves. Now, we are yet to have a single or an act that speaks to AI across the continent. That means by default, we have had to use the existing data protection legislations, which now should stand at 40 of the, all African countries. 40 of them have legislations in force, which for me, it has offered a very good background for us to regulate AI. And in those particular legal instruments, you can see cross-cutting elements that, Florence, you're asking me about. What are the elements for data governance that are relevant to AI? And I have seen this being captured in some of the AI strategies, including the the AU AI strategy. So you want to pick out, these elements specifically in the acts that have been implemented in relation to data protection, which is a very vital thing because AI is premised on large data sets, which then necessitates consideration of the principles that requires, collection of data in a manner that not only protects the data itself, but also protects the owners of those particular data. Now, so when you look at the elements, you're looking at data in itself, data as is used in AI, but before I even bring out the elements, you maybe want to take note of course, for the benefit of our listeners, is that a lot of the focus has been on data that concerns the human. So data protection laws, a lot of the times is concerned with personal data, but then AI deals with over and above just personal data because we have all other sets of data that is useful to AI. So the major focus that has been in Africa is what are these principles that concerns protection of personal data? But of course, there are conversations on how we can extend that to all other forms of data. So the first element that, of course, you would want to look at, and it's something that is coming up across, the existing frameworks, is are we adhering to privacy and security of that particular data? A lot of the times we have conversations about how sensitive data is being collected. Now, in the case of Kenya, for instance, I think one of the biggest cases that we always keep referring to is the WorldCoin case that happened in Kenya. And it gave us a clear perspective of how AI can use particular sets of data and what are the concerns arising from that. And the use of sensitive personal data became the center of the conversations on how are you going to ensure that you collect the data but still protects the sensitivity of that particular data. So data privacy and security becomes the very first element you want to look at when you talk about, data governance and AI. The other key thing that is coming across is data quality and integrity, which is quite interesting because when we started having conversations about AI, there was a lot of doubt about the quality of the data and the integrity of the data that is being used to train the AI models. And a lot of what was happening from, the part of the world that we're in, Africa, is, the general perspective or perceptions that, the data that was being used did not really look at, one, the quality in terms of were you on the ground to collect the most useful and quality data, and also just train the models in a manner that just looks at, adheres to integrity processes of collection of the data. But I'm happy that this is something that, is being kind of implemented, and it's another key element of data governance that we always bring up when we talk about data for AI. Linked to that is bias detection and fairness, which is also yet another thing that we kept raising. Is the data fair enough from the perspectives of Africans who are either now contributing to the collection of the data, or the data that has already been represented, does it give a fair position of how, the data has been collected within the African continent, data accountability and traceability. I want to link that with also transparency and explainability, because you want to see systems that, are transparent and explainable. I know this is a very interesting conversation to bring up, bearing in mind that we have intellectual property related issues that come out from just having the models so transparent and explainable, but is a key element that we are also looking at when we talk about data governance. And because of the openness or the transparency of these systems, we can then hold the institutions or the AI developers, AI systems accountable, right? And then we can also trace if there are errors relating to bias, if there is, any form of discrimination arising from those. And lastly, just so I don't go for, more than the allocated time, is regulatory compliance, which is also a data governance issue. Are we really adhering to data governance laws when it comes to training the AI models, right? I've been in rooms where, the conversations are about relaxing the rules on data governance to allow innovators develop. Because if we make them a bit stringent that require strict adherence to the law, then we'll never grow as a continent. But it's a very interesting conversation that, you know, as much as we want to grow the AI tools, we also just develop a framework or an environment where we are complying with legal frameworks as we see and watch what will be happening within the AI space within the African continent. Over to you, Florence.
Thank you so much, Nelly, for those wonderful inception insights in correlating AI governance to data governance, pointing out on particular already existing data governance structures that specifically feed into what AI governance structures would look like in terms of the principles of fairness, transparency, some of the key challenges and risks that come out with respect to bias, as well, touching also a bit on the human component of it, and the constant fight that we have between balancing innovation and regulation as well. So in building on further discussions on looking at data as a foundation, we now move to look at it from a more local government approach. Nelly, I think I will circle back to you on just one follow-up question. So we go to Yvonne and speak to how the local government's actually looking at data. So local governments often hold a huge wealth of data ranging from land records, service delivery, public health information. So for you, Yvonne, what would you say is the ideal vision that is basically being had at the county level, especially in Kenya, in terms of leveraging data for AI use, considering it at county level, and considering it with respect to data governance frameworks that also allow data to be used responsibly, and building on that so that we can have slightly more robust, not only data governance structures, but those that build into AI governance structures as well. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you so much, Florence. So interestingly, okay, so just for the sake of those who do not understand much about Kenya, so currently, based on the 2010 Constitution of Kenya, we've got devolved governments. Some countries call them regional governments, and some they are considered more like states, more similar to states. So perhaps for our people out there, they can understand that Kenya has got the 47 county governments and of course the national government. And currently I work at one of those county governments. And the reality is Murang'a is on the front of when it comes to AI and AI technology. And we are very lucky to have leadership that understands the drive towards AI. In fact, I think my governor on 12th of November was doing a presentation on AI and counties at the ICT Summit in Nairobi. So we are very much aware about AI, and we are keeping tabs on AI governance as well, just to leverage that for the benefit of counties. So we have a devolved mandate under the Constitution, and one of the key ways to understand devolution is by calling it decentralization. We're just bringing things to a local level, meaning we need to be beneficiaries of AI. So Murang'a has several AI programs, and anybody who can try to look for them online, you can look at something we are calling now Prompt. It's basically promoting moms through pregnancy and postpartum through SMS. That's what Prompt stands for. So our healthcare is really leaning towards AI, also in diagnostic medicine. We also have a lot of AI coming up in the agricultural sector and in revenue collection. AI with regards to our records for land is also now starting to be a conversation, but at least the healthcare and agriculture and revenue are already on board. So in my ideal vision of how we are going to deal with the governance landscape involving AI, I think the very first thing is what Dr. Nelly has talked about, data protection and privacy. Again, we rely mostly on national laws. We are yet to have a discussion as a county on do we have sufficient data protection measures as a county. I feel even at the national level, we are not yet there, as Dr. Nelly also said. So you can imagine that for counties, it's already been a discussion. We have a lot of course, because of these AI platforms, we have collected a lot of data. Both, like if you look at the one for healthcare, it collects data not just on the women, it collects even data on their family history, data on health in regards to Murang'a population, and we do not have sufficient data protection, either policies. We actually don't even have a policy. We don't have a law on data protection for counties. We rely on the one that is national. The other also issue we are having is the data storage. Like every other entity in Kenya, our data is stored abroad. I believe that the data storage for Murang'a is done at a European country. I may not mention right now, but you know where. Definitely it's not in Kenya. So that also comes the issue. There's also the issue where we talk about data storage, and I know Dr. Nelly will mention about this, there's also the data mining. I mean, who has got access to that data? If it's the access to data that you have of healthcare of pregnant women, are you able to mine data and probably sell to us very expensive drugs that sort of tie on the women and what they need? And of course, how safe is our data? Commercialization, knowing that currently one of the biggest currencies we have is data. And I know Dr. Nell will agree that. So that would be one of the challenges we have in the current governance landscape. Of course, we have the issue of infrastructure and access. Very unfortunately, Moranga is not yet to the last mile in terms of electricity connection, meaning that we limit the number of people who have smartphones because of the need to be regularly charged. Moranga is still not entirely 5G covered. I mean, the places you'll go and automatically your phone will pick the 4G and even 3G is still present in some parts of Moranga. So of course we have that limited access to high also presence computing, even in Moranga town where we could have 5G for all purposes, but I mean, we don't have access to that kind of high level computing. Of course, the regulatory framework for AI is still alien to counties. I am yet to come across a county that is discussing AI governance. I mean, it's there at the national level. I know CPT is doing some work with the national government on that. I doubt even CPT is doing any discussions with any county on the regulatory frameworks for AI. So maybe that's something new. You also need to pick up, Florence, in your next project. And of course, devolving AI to local, innovation of AI that ties with the local people. So I can possibly just very quickly say that one of the challenges we have when we're integrating AI to healthcare also is the education level of some of these people in Moranga. Are they able to, and even for those who are educated, do they understand what is AI? Even if you take a secondary school teacher at a local Moranga school, do they understand what is AI? Much less now for the illiterate or semi-illiterate people who make a good percentage of the population in Moranga, and we need them to be part of this AI. So we find a lot of our grandparents, when they go to hospitals and they are triggered to give the information to AI systems, they don't even know. Actually, they are asked questions in, say, local languages, and the local language here is Kikuyu predominantly, a bit of Kamba in some regions of Moranga, and they're asked to give the information in a local language. They don't even understand the information they are giving, much less are they able to directly interact with AI tools. So I think for me, I'm looking forward to a platform that will take advantage of also even being in a way to be understood locally, whether that means interpreting to them in a way they can understand, or that means having AI platforms that are in our local languages. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Florence.
Thank you. Thank you for those insights, Yvonne, on touching on relevance of AI literacy across the board, not just at for the people, for the public understanding it, but also for those in actual government having AI literacy skills, and looking at infrastructure and access, which I had mentioned as I was doing the presentation, in terms of our readiness to leverage some of these technologies, as well as highlighting the specific issues that relate to data in terms of data protection. So just to mention off the cuff that Kenya is in the process of coming up with its data governance policy framework, which I think will sort of address some of the more weightier issues with respect to data, separating it from what is personal data to handling the bigger threshold of data governance structures as well. So seeing how that will trickle down, not just from national government to county level and local government, will be quite interesting. So in segueing on to having a more robust conversation with our representative, our East African representative, Stella. So from your perspective and knowledge of AI as it is being leveraged within the justice sector, how has data played, or how is data playing a significant role in leveraging AI, particularly for that segment of the justice sector? What are the key data governance parameters that you're seeing that must be considered in thinking of AI governance, as well as regulatory parameters? Also noting that Rwanda was one of the first East African countries to come up with its national AI strategy, and they are progressing quite significantly with respect to it.
Yes, thank you, Florence, and the speakers, previous speakers. I think they really touched on most of the key data governance principles, but probably I'll touch on a few others. However, maybe let's go back. Which kind of data? So even for the justice sector, I think it's one of the sensitive sectors as well, like health and other sensitive sectors. It's up there. Now, for AI to function, of course, it needs data. We all know this. Everyone now knows that. So when we look at, let's say in our case, the justice sector, so we have, let's say for we have the civil cases. So all the way from judiciary, you go to, you work with the civil litigation, the bailiffs and all that. And then you have, for the penal, you have also the investigation bureaus, police that is involved, prosecution that is involved, and so on and so forth, and correction facilities. So now imagine you are racing to either adopt AI or use AI, yet you don't have data in the first place, and data that is digitized in the first place, and not just one actor in the chain. You're just looking at probably the courts that are digitized, but what about prosecution? What about police? What about investigation? So we need to look at it in a holistic manner and assess how ready we are, even with the data, before even we go to the AI. So most of the time we talk about AI, but there's a lot of groundwork that needs to happen before even looking at that. We can have, of course, the policies in place, we can have the regulations in place, data governance principles in place, but if we don't have the raw materials ready, then I don't think it will really catch on very well. So we have to make sure that our countries, our respective countries or counties as well, have digitized data. So we have, let's say, as court decisions that are digitized, we have case files that are digitized, witness statements, that's the data that AI will feed off to make a prediction or have a sentencing in place. So, or an automated legal decision. So I think we need to really, maybe, because we are racing with the entire world, whereby other parts of the world, they already have digitized data that is standardized, because our date of birth, you can find in one system, it's American, it starts with a year, and then month, and then date. In another system, you find it starts with a date, month, and year. So data standardization can also wreck the entire data quality that you're basing off, even to start using the AI system that either you've procured or you've built in-house. So I think for me, the practical, the dirty work that we need to do is where I really focus on a lot and try to point it out that there's the whole policy, regulation, governance part of it, but now the data in itself. So answering the questions, the court decisions that we need to look at in the justice sector, and digitized one that I had mentioned. So in Rwanda, what we did is making sure that the entire justice chain is digitized and they work together. So from investigation, prosecution, judiciary, and Rwanda correction facilities, they all work in the same system that is integrated. So what does that help? It helps that even data is not in silos, and also data sharing is very easy. So now when you bring in the AI systems or tools, then it will be easier. However, we also still have challenges. Of course, we've been digitized since 2016, the justice sector. So everything is paperless. So, however, when now we get into the emerging technologies of saying, okay, how do we now procure AI and make sure that we have probably an automated decision or sentencing and so on. And that's where now we need to enforce the data standardization. We need to enforce human oversight, because now it's a sensitive sector, right? So the human oversight should be part of the principles that we look at data governance as well. And as well as looking at access control. Who has access to what data, when, and what are they going to use it for? So that is also part of the privacy, but also how do we put in safeguards? And also making sure that bias, we tackle bias, discrimination, fairness, all that stuff. Because however much the AI is sophisticated, AI system is sophisticated, if we don't have such principles in place, then we will actually amplify injustices, right? So there is a lot. So with AI or data governance, it also, we need to balance out what sector are we dealing with, right? And the risks that are involved. So conducting risk impact assessments should be part of the procurement or even procuring the AI system that is going to be used. In our case, I think that's where now we are heading at, because we're having a lot of vendors that are coming. We have an AI system. Can we, plug in, and then we start using, you start using the data. But okay, so what are the models? Can we have transparency of your models? Can we understand what is the exit strategy once your company probably is no longer interested in working with Rwanda, and so on and so forth. So to cut it short, yes, let us first look at the data that we have. Is it accurate? Is it consistent? Is it harmonized across? We have harmonized or interoperable databases across the sector that we are working in, right? And now start enforcing the data governance principles that are already in place. We can borrow them, we can also customize them, but we need to enforce, practically start looking at it. We look at the data. If it's not standardized, we'd say, okay, we're all going to either adopt the American date of birth standard, and we follow that, so that when the AI comes in, it flows so well. So I'll pause there, but it's mostly looking at all those aspects, and of course, fairness and bias, looking at bias and human oversight is very critical when we use AI systems or adopt them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those insights as well. Stella, you've really covered quite a bit of ground with respect to what infrastructure AI systems would ideally be built on, beginning from digitization and going paperless, and then bringing key elements with relation to the data standards, data quality, data validity, and key elements of including human beings within the entire process, human in the loop, so to speak, in terms of building some of these AI systems and in actually leveraging them. Then bringing in components of procurement as well. So looking at, you've basically done a great job at looking at the entire AI value chain within the particular justice sector and what that would look like. And then further bringing in very key elements in terms of the actual principles that go into what I'd call the stack of sort of building these governance structures. So building on from data governance structures and those that can be incorporated into AI governance structures, and looking at it from that perspective, which brings us now to the next segment of it in terms of operationalizing principles into actual law. So this is something that this is a question that will be generalized, that will go to all the panelists who will speak from their particular perspectives and points of view. So in considering that AI governance has already had a number of instruments that have been developed internationally in terms of especially the outlining of principles. So you have the UNESCO principles on the ethics of AI. We also have the OECD principles. And you'll notice that some other organizations or big tech companies have come up with their own specific principles of how to deal with AI throughout the process. And we are seeing some of these specific principles also replicated in our national AI strategies. We are seeing them replicated in the Rwanda National AI Strategy, the Kenya AI Strategy, as well as the AU AI Strategy. So from your perspective, how do you see these principles being incorporated into actual policy and legislation? And what role do you see yourself playing in informing and influencing policy process, especially based on the track you've spoken on from your different perspectives and your different sort of sectors? I think we'll begin with Nelly and then circle back to you, Stella. So Nelly, over to you.
Certainly, Florence. I want to link my discussion to what Stella has said. It's it paints a very broad picture of how the specific sectors do work, but also applies just across sectors and also across nations. It's very foundational, and it's something that you can already see appearing in AI strategies. And when you ask about how the principles are being incorporated, it all goes down to how are we implementing all these on the ground. And it also links to my earlier conversation about what are the principles that we are taking into consideration as we develop data. Now, these already are appearing in soft laws that you did mention earlier on. And as we mentioned, we don't have an act yet in Africa. Of course, Kenya is in the process of developing something that could be more concrete, just moving away from, the soft laws that we currently have. But the big question is, how are we incorporating these to policies and also to just implementation, and how we want to see AI develop within the African continent? And the big question that we are having is, data and data sovereignty. So you want to talk about, do we have control over the data that we are using? The biggest debate when we raise AI from an African perspective is, do we own the data that we have? Now, it goes in line with the principles of data sovereignty and inclusivity, right? Do we own this data that we have? And what are we doing about just taking ownership of the data? And what has been happening alongside just having that outlined in existing AI strategies is just, we see a lot of groundwork happening. The way Stella put it, we are doing the dirty work as at now to just ensure that we are also creating our own kind of data. And this is something that, of course, we see being incorporated in new policies, both data protection and also AI, to just ensure that we not only are trying to be in line with what the rest of the world is doing, but we are also just factoring in our very own scenarios. And when we talk data sovereignty, we're seeing how our very own data systems that speaks to the various languages within the African continent are being developed. I think that is the crux of the matter. We want to really see, when we talk about data sovereignty, we're not just talking about just owning certain sets of data, but we want to see ownership all the way down to the grassroots, even the very people who are supplying this kind of data, and how inclusive are these kinds of data, so that we eliminate challenges that related to fairness and exclusion of select groups of people. So that is one principle that you want to see, and even as we develop more concrete laws, data sovereignty and inclusivity. We did mention about transparency and accountability, and one of the concerns that we had, especially for big tech, sorry if there's anyone in the audience who is working for the big techs, but I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is something that maybe pushed startups in Africa, is just the concern of, are the existing AI tools transparent and accountable in themselves? So that is one principle that, of course, we want to see incorporated and actually implemented, so that you can actually investigate and see how a particular AI tool is being trained, and you can hold them accountable because of the errors that sort of they could have on how the data has been collected and how it has been collected. Human rights and ethics, this is quite an interesting debate. And as you mentioned, as we are talking about and incorporating the principles of data protection to AI, are we also replicating that to AI, specifically tailored AI and ethics related principles, so that as we develop the systems from the onset, we are also just ensuring that they are compliant with legal provisions without necessarily derailing innovators? Now, how do I contribute to such discourses, and how do I just help achieve this? I think one of the forums that we get to do this is this, because the first point would be, educate or provide platforms for people to learn about AI in the first place. One of the big challenges that we get to see is lack of capacity that is evident in so many African countries. And I think Stella did point out this, that you may have the policies, yes, but other people are aware. So one way of us contributing is just spreading the gospel and providing the platform for people to just come discuss, contribute. Of course, facilitating research, because research is a key tool towards just enlightening and also disseminating what is quite useful. So research facilitation, going on the ground to just collect the data, and then just representing that for use and consumption by the very people who are contributing to the growth of AI, or in addition to what we have done at CPIT, like contributing to the developing of the AI policy framework, the current ongoing policies, which is quite useful. You are not just consuming the policies or the frameworks that are out there, but you're actually just influencing that from the ground level all the way up, and then ensuring that there's implementation. I will allow the rest of the panelists maybe add on to that. I'm sure I've not exhausted all the ways that we can contribute to the discourse. Over to you, Florence.
Thank you, Nelly. Yvonne, the same question applies in terms of how you see the principles being incorporated and your particular role in influencing the policy process.
Once again, thank you very much. So how I see these principles being incorporated, I think for me, one of the key things is, as you're aware, one of the roles of county governments is the implementation of specific national government policies and laws to the county. So we need to have a way of cascading those policies back to the county, as well as at the same time adopting Moranga specific policies. So as I said, with the devolution, it's about decentralization, and we are not divorced from the national government. So some of the national government and policies that will come will be adopted as is by the different counties. But again, it's also a call for counties, noting their unique nature, noting our unique landscape, our unique geopolitical, economic landscape, even when it comes to just counties even next to each other. So it's also for us to adopt our own county-specific ones. And I believe when we talk about Africa, one very important thing has to come. It's also about the role of indigenous knowledge when it comes to AI, in terms of incorporating our indigenous knowledge into whatever policies we do, as well as getting to own our own AI when it comes to indigenous knowledge. We don't want it to go there. Was it the Kyondo way, where you come up with something, but it becomes the intellectual property of somebody else differently? So I think this is a call to Africa, that even as we are sharing our data as counties, as a country, as we share our data, because AI is about centralizing all this data, and it's at a central point where everybody can access it. Are we protecting our indigenous law, and are we incorporating our own? Perhaps because Stella is coming after me, she could mention something about, I remember doing a paper somewhere about ADR and Gashanja courts. Perhaps she could mention too, as they are doing AI, how are they protecting the indigenous knowledge? And I saw a lot of their indigenous knowledge when it comes to dispute resolution through their, if I'm not wrong, I think the correct pronunciation is Gashanja courts. So maybe she can say something about it. I think another policy we need to come into measure is strategic partnerships, because a lot of what we are going to do around AI is not a one-stop shop. It doesn't belong to one person. So if it is the counties, we will be collaborating with the national government, we will be collaborating with other public and civil entities when it comes to AI. It's all about strategic partnerships. Partnerships that don't expose our data to data mining out there, partnerships that protect our data, partnerships that recognize our own indigenous knowledge, and how can we leverage that to our advantage. So of course, now in my capacity as a lawyer and policy specialist, I will be involved, of course, even in the drafting of some of these policies. And for those that I don't draft, I'll perhaps need to review them and create advisories and see how, in conjunction with other stakeholders, how are they able to be cut to size to apply to Moranga County? How are they able to fit Moranga County? Because I like to tell people that counties are like different individuals, and our work is to tailor make clothes to fit those specific individuals. So we have to look at Moranga and see that, is this suit going to fit you, right? From all the way from the head to the top, right? The way tailors customize our clothes. So it's about me looking and developing and reviewing the different laws and policies to make them specifically suit Moranga. Of course, there's also an analysis of the policies, and the beauty with analyzing these policies that part of it involves a research element, looking at best practices. Am I able to go to Rwanda and see their best practices? Am I able to talk to our colleagues? I can see somebody saying we look at something in Burkina Faso. Am I able to look at there and see the best policies, the best practice? Am I also able to look at Nigeria, which is doing a lot in terms of AI and health, and also pick the best policies from them? So I think that for those of us who are engaged in the different levels of the policy, a big element of best practices is also looking at it. Even for Stella, who is in IT, I mean, she's also looking at best practices from other countries who are ahead of her in AI and ICT. So I think that my work is cut out for me, because I need to know a lot to be able to design what is the best for Murang'a. And again, I need to know this a lot. I need to have a lot of relations, even with academia, like Dr. Nelly is talking about, with people who are doing research. I mean, at the end of the day, I also need to be in conjunction with all of you people. So I think it's a lot of work. I don't believe even in our lifetime we will complete doing it, but I'm very excited to be among the people who are on the table having this discussion as to how we are going to do it. So for me, it's a holistic approach where everybody has to come on board: private sector, public sector, civil, academia. I mean, even the bloggers. I mean, we need to bring everybody abroad to make this whole thing holistically be tailor-made to suit Murang'a County and other counties.
Thank you so much for that, Yvonne. You've also brought in quite, you've actually demonstrated how vast and wide building AI governance structures, or framing even what the policy components of it would look like and who it would ideally entail, and more specifically bringing in components of cultural rights as they correlate to AI, especially in terms of how we look at our indigenous knowledge and expanding that scope a bit wider. So over to you, Stella.
Yes, yes, thank you very much. I think Yvonne and Nelly touched quite a bit on the, how do we make these principles into law, or the different challenges, but also the work that is being done currently, be it in Kenya or across other nations. So maybe I'll start with the principles, right? So I think the question was around UNESCO recommendations. We have the OECD, we have the continental one, so AU. So when you look at UNESCO, they're all about human rights, transparency, fairness, and so on, or human oversight. So when you look at OECD, then we have innovation and responsible AI development, and how can it practically be done. So when you look at the continental principles, they're into capacity building, because of course AU, we need a lot of capacities, and but as well data governance and ethics. So now looking at all those principles in the different best practices that other countries have adopted, how do we then get them? I mean, we can't invent the wheel, we can customize them, but at least start with what is there and what is working for other countries. So if it's fairness, we make sure that in the laws, first of all, we have the ICT laws, at least for Kenya, Rwanda, and most of the countries have ICT laws. Do we go back and amend the laws in some aspects? Do we completely look at the principles and say, okay, we need a new law in place, right? We need new regulations in place. So it's really to go back and look at what is existing, what we have, what are the laws, the ICT laws, the cybersecurity laws, data protection laws that are in place, any legal instrument that we have, or any guiding principle that we have in the country or in the county, and have subject matter experts come in one place and look at them, review, revise them, and amend them, or come up with completely new regulations and new laws. So we look at, so the first part is looking at the principles and translate them, but also have subject matter experts or empowered, advisories, like Yvonne was saying, and then they look at the laws, right? So after that, I don't think everything should be in the law, enacted in law. We can have soft law and hard law, or soft regulation and hard regulation, self-compliance, and, where we impose penalties. So I think that's the balance that we need as we move, as we learn, as we look at other best practices. So I think we need that flexibility, and I think that's where agile regulation, agile, lawmaking comes into place, because most of the time we think agile is just technical or other aspects, but I think it has to also be part of the lawmakers to make sure that there's that agility. And also the other aspect that's probably that needs to be looked at is the regulatory sandboxes that we have to put in place in respective sectors or countries. How do we make sure that we pilot and see, can we adopt the law, or did we make a mistake and go back and revise the law? So that's but also not stifling the other principle of innovation, right? So that we have a balance, because technology, we all know it's a principle that it's a fact, rather, it's a fact that technology is faster than regulation. So we need to balance out by putting in regulatory sandboxes, making sure that we have people on the same table that are looking at the existing legislations or laws and amend them or completely come up with new ones, right? So then I think the other part is also mandating some of the data governance principles that we saw, right? Making sure that either if you're going to procure an AI system, you need to have an impact assessment in place. It's mandated. So either it's in the regulation or in the law or in the guidelines. If it's a sector that is sensitive, we have to mandate human oversight, not just make it, you know, by the way, but more mandated way or approach that we need to look at. So, and so on and so forth. So I think it's just look at the principles that are there, come up with new ones, or adopt the ones that we have, and have subject matter experts on one table, and they really try to mirror that in legislations, be it new or amending existing ones, but also not forgetting innovation, and also, of course, the private sector and the startups that want to innovate, and we are stifling them because we want to regulate everything. So making sure that we put in soft regulation and hard regulation at the same time. But also, maybe lastly, looking at the high risk and low risk systems or sectors, and you know, the balance. I think the key word is balance. We have to balance out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stella. You've really put in quite a number of components, but I'm seeing a collective agreement in terms of involving as many people and as many stakeholders, which also gives it a slightly multi-stakeholder / multidisciplinary approach in terms of how we would be able to apply some practical elements in terms of operationalizing these principles into actual law and then further implementation down the road. You've also mentioned something key about having the experts joining in, key experts joining into the conversations, not only to bring their technical knowledge, but also to enhance what the process would be for generating or developing specific regulatory parameters and regulatory mechanisms. And with that, that brings us to elements of now capacity building and inclusion, because we note that effective governance actually does require skilled regulators, aware citizens, and a responsible industry, be it public sector, be it private sector. So this cuts across all the panelists as well. So what would you say is the role of multidisciplinary collaboration? It could be researchers, local government, arms of the government, and the wider stakeholder groups in terms of looking at CSOs and other communities in building this particular capacity, and how ideally would you see strategies to ensure that diverse voices are included in governance processes, which is something that I think we are seeing come up more in terms of public participation and things like that. So once again, I'll cut across, but we can start from you, Stella, then move around once again.
Yes, I think it's inevitable. It's inevitable in this day and age where internet is across, where knowledge is, you know, accessible to everyone, and also how we are all interconnected, right? To be able to believe that you're going to work alone and succeed, that's, you know, it's not possible. So different experts with different knowledge should be at the same table. I think I mentioned that earlier. If it's technical experts, let them now, you know, look at the AI models, let them look at the technology that is there and the impact that it's gonna, you know, have on their systems or the business, the core business of the particular sector that they're in. And I think that's where we come in as technical guys or ladies. Now, we have also the lawyers, definitely to look at the laws and so on and so forth. The researchers, to make sure that they're also on the table and see, you know, whatever is being done now, can it, you know, what are their forecasts what are the findings they're looking at when it comes probably to the justice sector, in my case, right? And so on and so there's academia, of course, and it is inevitable for them not to also understand the key principles or the foundational principles of AI. Because sometimes lawyers might not understand that, right? What AI is to begin with. Researchers might be probably very, into the PhD, and they're looking at other stuff, and they have no idea how the intricacies of AI. They just know the overview of it, but they don't fully understand. So I think making sure that, first of all, even the experts are aligned, are on the same page, I think that's very key, right? Can they, even though you have a week or 2 days to have everyone have a common understanding, and then they go into the work of now putting together their core expertise to work. So I think that's first of, I think something that I would do, or we are trying to do, because recently we have the Chandler Institute of Justice, I guess. So it brought all actors in Rwanda, private, government, civil, and everyone on the same table to look at how we can amend our existing laws and what principles or methodologies that we need to put in place to be able to now be ready for AI, or at least not be reactive, but proactive in other instances which are still coming into the country. So I think that's what we need to first do, right? Because sometimes you can think an expert is an expert in their own area, but they're not experts in another area. So alignment, first of all. So, and also bringing in the private sector, of course, they have the market insights, they know the infrastructure, and government will always, the budget, our budgets are not limited. So how do they bring in co-creation and probably using their infrastructure for testing and piloting, as we also source our own infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So capacity building for our own technical people, because most of the time we are either procuring from outside the country. We don't know what that model is doing. There's no transparency whatsoever. We don't even know what it's a black box. So how do we also be able to train our technical staff to understand the intricacies of AI, now the technical intricacies of AI, so that when the lawmakers are doing their job, when the governance bodies are doing their job, the local technical staff, they're also being trained and they become experts in that area as well, not rely solely on external or foreign expertise. Instead, have a partnership and co-create solutions that are custom-made, but also with the context and the African context. Now, maybe lastly, how the Gachacha and ADR components that Yvonne was talking about, I think that's where we are heading. So we have this cultural homegrown solution that really helped the country, helped Rwanda in accelerating justice delivery. Now, when it comes into AI, I think that's where the data, do we have all the Gachacha courts digitized? So it's that process. So that once we start even including AI tools or applying AI tools, we're able not to lose the principles that are built on Rwandan principles, not Kenya, not European, but Rwandan principles. And that's where now the multidisciplinary expertise comes in. So someone who really understands the Gachacha, the fabric of the Rwandan way of thinking and judgment. So you have that person on the table with the technical guy, with the lawyers, I think then we are adhering to the principles that we saw to begin with. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those insights, Stella. Yvonne?
All right. Again, thank you very much. I think Stella is also lucky that when it comes to whatever she's doing in the judiciary, as much as I've had her mention even from our fellowship days on bringing the lawyers, the prosecutors, the judiciary on the table, she's rather lucky in the sense that the literacy levels of those people are more or less at par. I think maybe the only challenge would be sometimes the clients who would need to go to. So for me, in terms of capacity, there presents a unique challenge that I have when it comes to AI in terms of literacy levels in the county. Because for me, my AI programs or whatever I'll have with AI will be targeted towards a big number of illiterate people who are not even, some are not even computer savvy. And even for those who are computer savvy, AI is a discussion they're beginning to have, they're not technocrats. So I think the biggest challenge is community involvement in terms of how do I bring the community involvement, not just for the rubber stamping public participation that we like to do in our laws, but for them to actually be involved. And how do I bring them to be at the same power when it comes to capacity building, to be at the same level with technocrats, to be at the same level with people from strategic institutions that I may need to partner with, to be on the same level with people in academia like Dr. Nelly and then you, Florence. So my biggest challenge will be the literacy level. How do I bring everybody on board to a level where everybody is part of the AI discussion? Never mind that probably your academic level is at primary level, because I mean, when I talk about things, AI in healthcare, healthcare is for everybody, from the most educated to the most illiterate person. And if we are using AI systems in healthcare, then even this very illiterate person has to be at a level of understanding what information are they feeding. Even if somebody is going to interpret, they do need to understand. So for me, literacy levels remains one of the biggest issues in terms of capacity. Of course, another way of capacity building is what I talked about, strategic partnerships with different institutions. So in my context, I've got local institutions, I've got the national government, I've got academia, I've got multinational institutions, and I've got also local institutions, both academia and other institutions. I've got very interesting institutions like the church. And when you look at the church in Moranga, it is involved in school, so it is involved in academia. We've got schools, even colleges, which are church-sponsored. It is very much involved in healthcare. Some of our best private medical facilities in Moranga, we probably don't have Aga Khan and the avenues, but our best medical facilities are facilities by the church. So we've also got the church involved uniquely. I don't know if anybody else has such an instance where the church is very highly involved, and I don't know what the church has to say about AI. Perhaps they're our next customers when it comes to AI. And so I have to be able to have strategic partnerships with all these different stakeholders at their different levels for these AI programs and systems to work in Moranga. Of course, there's also the issue of education of AI. So you find that the issue for AI, today I was talking with my daughter who is 8 and my nieces who are 11 and 18 and 17 on AI. And you realize that to them, what they know about AI is ChatGPT. And they're like, yeah, no, ChatGPT can help me do my assignments. So again, it's education of AI. I mean, we have moved from ChatGPT, we are going more to more advanced AI. And I think Dr. Nelly and Dr. Betty and the team who had us in the fellows educated us that AI has moved so far from just ChatGPT. So how do we integrate AI education to even our young people, because an element of education is devolved again. And of course, now my biggest contender, AI and local dialects. So I think there's a time I realized that when you're on the WhatsApp groups, sometimes Meta AI picks up some of the things you're discussing in WhatsApp groups. And of course, a lot of the WhatsApp groups around the county, some of the words that will be mentioned, either the name of a place, either a particular term will come in our local dialect. And the feedback you get is that AI tells you that, oh, is this a Swahili or a Kikuyu word? I'm trying to learn Swahili, so please help me understand what this is about. I'm trying to learn Kikuyu, so help me understand what it's about. So again, the use of local dialects with AI. Because for my grandmother to embrace that AI is able to facilitate her with her blood pressure medication, she needs to feel confident enough that when she communicates to AI, sometimes in a local dialect, does it understand or does it appreciate the challenge I'm having? So for her AI to embrace, it can't just work for when she goes to a hospital with a doctor who has a level of education on English to be able to work into AI. I'll be very curious, and perhaps I'll reach out to Stella later, how I know that Rwanda has a lot of Banyarwanda spoken and a lot of French. It still plays a role. I'll be very curious to know that on your AI platforms, the judiciary, have you introduced a bit of the Banyarwanda and the French as part of the AI languaging? Because I think in Kenya, with our 47 different counties, different languages spoken in all those counties, some of which are very indigenous languages, how is AI going to be, is it going to grow to a level where it's not only incorporating English, it's also bringing on both Swahili and bringing on both sometimes those indigenous languages. So I think in terms of capacity, we are still a very long way to come as counties, but I am very happy with the progress we are making so far. And I'm very happy that even the medics who are right now pioneering the AI systems in healthcare, they are able to, they're able, even some of our medics are not locals, of course. They are doctors who have studied abroad and who have come from many other areas. We've even had doctors from Cuba. I know the rest of the countries are aware about that. We had some doctors from Cuba, and you see they're able to integrate AI, have interpreters who are interpreting, and then the end user of that AI product is a local who is a class H dropout. So she's probably only been able to communicate in Swahili and Kikuyu. And we're just seeing how that integration is happening. It's beautiful, but I hope that we're going to build more and more capacity in terms of even our locals to be able to apply from the simplest to the slightly complicated AI systems that are now coming in place. So thank you, Florence.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I will move to Nelly.
Thank you, Florence. I think the beauty of coming last is just, having the advantage of highlighting what the previous speakers have said, and I want to highlight that. Stella did mention a lot of the issues that sort of come up and the importance of just multidisciplinary approaches. And she spoke quite well about the need for, number one, knowledge exchange, which is quite, the epicenter of why do we need various stakeholders in a room when we are talking about AI governance? Because myself as an academic will not have the same brain as a data scientist or someone who has worked in policy for a long time. So just having the diversity of opinion is quite instrumental. But maybe one other thing that wasn't mentioned is, when we have diverse voices when you're developing policies, it creates a scenario where the policies that are being developed are relevant, right? Policy relevance is quite instrumental. When we had, the AI strategies or even the legislations, the next thing that we want to see is, are they being implemented? Now, in a scenario where you don't bring all the stakeholders, you would face a lot of challenges just giving that to life. But just having, the industry players in the room just contribute from what is most useful to them, not really impacting to their own benefit, but just for the general growth of the sector, because I know there's danger of having maybe one-sided opinions on how a policy is being developed and how it impacts the growth across the sectors, but policy relevance is certainly one of the key benefits of just having multi-stakeholders in a room. The other key thing that Stella did also mention, and also Yvonne, is risk mitigation. I like the way Yvonne just brought out the trickle-down effect of AI and how you're supposed to just have everyone within the society just aware. But that framework can only be achieved if you have all the players in the room to just detect potential harm, and how to just create systems that are most beneficial also to the consumers, not just the AI developers, which is quite useful in just ensuring that you eliminate bias, just ensure that you're creating systems that are quite useful. And lastly, I think just creating a system of trust and legitimacy, because you don't want particular players. Data scientists will say we were not in the room, policymakers are not aware of what is happening. So it's just to create an harmonious and trust, within the system. It's just quite beneficial to have various stakeholders within the room. Now, how has this been achieved? I think in Kenya, we have tried to create a framework where we bring on board various stakeholders. I know this happened when we were developing the AI strategy, for instance, where you would see kind of working groups or advisory boards just incorporating or bringing on board various players to just lend their voices and contribute to the development of the existing policies. And it's something that, of course, is happening on a trickle-down effect or kind of way, and also just seeing that being replicated within the county government, as Yvonne has highlighted, is something that is quite notable. I know we are still building this, and we haven't gotten it 100%, but I think where we are at now, it's there's optimism even as we try and see what is happening within the rest of the world, because I think the epicenter of AI is also AI developers that kind of shapes how AI grows. And I don't know if there's adequate infrastructure or room for that to happen within the African continent. But of course, what we are seeing so far, there is also just that opportunity for diversity of voices and just inclusivity across all the sectors. Lawrence, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nelly, Yvonne, and Stella, for those insights. You've captured quite a number of components with respect to inclusion and levels of capacity building, from community involvement to skills transfer, not just externally, but as internally as well. Cultural perspectives has also come up once again, and it is quite interesting to see how that is being incorporated, especially in Rwanda, and with the court system, with that particular system for alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, and how when incorporating AI, maintaining those particular cultural preferences should still be maintained across the board. Then looking at it in terms of also a local first approach and a community-based approach into how governance can be structured, into how inclusion is being looked at across different sectors, be it health. Even you're really focused on health, I know that's a significant project for you, or significant key area of interest for you. Building strategic partnerships as well across the board. I think that's been common across all the panelists and the comments that they have made, as well as AI literacy being very, very key. I always say you can't understand components of policy, even at the most grassroots levels, if you don't have the most basic knowledge of what is being regulated. So AI literacy across the board, both at public community levels as well as government level, especially when it relates to AI, because as Yvonne, you've mentioned, right now, most people know AI as generative AI and ChatGPT, but there's a wider scope of how AI can be leveraged and what it actually entails in terms of its particular technologies, which is also evolving quite fast as well. So 5 years, 3 years from now, generative AI might be just, the most common thing ever, and something else has also been built up on the stack of AI systems and technologies. So with those remarks, I would like to open the floor for questions and comments from the participants. There's a few questions that had been sent in already, so I will start with those, and then once you've cleared the round of those, I can continue to open them up. So for the participants, please feel free to utilize the Q&A tab or the chat section for the particular questions. So the first question that came in was with respect to challenges for policy transfer. So this anonymous attendee asks that, to what extent is the challenge of policy transfer or diffusion the primary obstacle to effective regulation for emerging technologies in Africa? Given the continent's existing institutional and infrastructural gaps, what practical strategies should African nations implement to ensure that the lessons learned from other jurisdictions are adapted into realistically enforceable and context-specific laws and policies? Very comprehensive question, but very relevant key elements. So any of the panelists can answer this across the board. Ethan, Nelly?
Yeah, Florence, I think I can just go first and then allow the other panelists to also chime in. I think what I'm getting from the question is the issue relating to replication of policies or laws from the rest of the world to the African context, and whether or not we are taking into consideration our very own unique scenarios within the African continent. I think the attendee can just clarify if that is not the position, but that would be my interpretation. And I think this is something that we have sort of in passing mentioned in our contributions, that, you know, the biggest concern, and even as we were highlighting the principles themselves, for us, our major focus is, you know, are we creating systems that, or you know, opportunities or even frameworks that are useful to us as a continent. One would maybe ask rhetorically, Africa is developing policies, for instance, but what are you regulating, or which AI systems are you regulating? If you look at it and conclude and say that, you know, the data that is used in Africa is not owned by Africans, or the AI systems that we are using are largely developed from the rest of the world. So for me, I think what we look at, and I think this is something that maybe we would be watching to see in the following year or subsequent year, how, and you know, how Africans are already taking stage of what they are developing, like the drawing board, what Stella highlighted. We are now doing the dirty work of developing our own data and just trying to see, you know, how we are going to adapt the already existing policies. Holistically, what we already have are not necessarily African-owned kind of policies. I know there has been a lot of lessons that have been drawn from what the rest of the world initially developed. So we cannot say at this stage that those existing policies are African-centered, right? But the very basis for those policies were to just provide a framework or a basis for which we can also grow our own AI systems, which is a beginning point. This goes to show that as we also borrow lessons from the rest of the world, and as we start or continue to build data systems that are African-owned, there's a possibility, or there's a need for us to adapt the laws to suit what we would have developed going into the future. That is why you see there's no legal instrument or an act or any other hard law. We have soft laws just to create the environment for us to just grow our AI systems. But of course, it's something that I believe heads of states and all the governments that already have the strategies have in place as they keep monitoring the growth of AI within the African continent. So there's room for, you know, hard laws just away from the policies and the strategies that we already have. So it's a very legit question, and it's something that we always want to see answered by, of course, the right persons within government. Florence, over to you.
Thank you so much for those insights. Nelly, Stella?
Yes, I think it's a very good question, so reflective question, and probably I'll answer it by giving an analogy of a body. So we have the eyes, the nose, the ears, everything. So every part of the body is working together to make sure that either if the legs, I have to move from A to B. If it's eyes, I have to see properly, or I get, you know, glasses to see properly. So every institution in each country should do their job. So not think that they're going to outsource it to a consultant only. We need to do it. We need to really roll up our sleeves and do it ourselves, right? That's the very first thing that we need to do. We can't look away. We can't outsource it entirely. We can't think that it's going to happen out of the blue. So we need to really, each institution, if it's private sector, if it's academia, if it's government, everyone has to do their job so that the entire country or the entire multidisciplinary, you know, body functions, or at least we see results at the end of the day. And on top of that, we need to have also clear responsibilities, roles, and timelines. So I think these might seem very basic, but that's exactly what every other countries they do and get results. In our case, we think we're going to bring a consultant and draft our laws or policies or regulations and then put it there, because you are not involved in the first place. Even adopting it or enforcing it or using it is going to be difficult because you are not part of it. It's a document that is there and it's done. So for it to be live, I think we need that participation. So I think that's the one of the strategy. If it's a strategy, if it's a mechanism that we have to put in place, is participation, but active participation in the change that we want to see. So if it's policies, is everyone involved, and making sure that if it's academia, the students are actually understanding, are involved in AI conversation, and not just use ChatGPT and think they're now, they've adopted AI or they're experts in AI, you see? So, or use someone else's tool to detect, I don't know, fraud or plagiarism and think that, oh, now I am using AI. No, you're consuming AI, but you're not actively participating in that consumption or feedback loop for it to be even to improve it and also adopt it in your context. So I think for me, I would answer the question in a very short way. We need to be actively involved in the policy making, actively involved in making sure that the infrastructure gaps that are there are closed, because no one else is going to come close for us. All we need is the partnerships. We need the donors, we need the partnerships, we need technology experts. We need to work together with them. But I think the hard work has to start with us, and there's no shortcuts. I'm sorry to say, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. You've reminded me of earlier this year in June, we had the conference on the state of AI in Africa. And one of the key elements or components that came out was that no one is coming to save us, especially as the African continent. And we actually need to pull up our bootstraps and get into doing the work. You've also brought out a key component of the fact that the African continent is still primarily, we are very much consumers of AI. And we haven't really gotten into the more technical nitty-gritties of being active producers and adopting other key elements within the AI value chain. So moving aside from looking at it from being just consumers and to being active participants within the AI value chain and within that particular ecosystem, as well as governance mechanisms. So thank you so much for those insights. Yvonne, do you have any thoughts? I think the next question was with respect to the judiciary, which I think is going to you, again, Stella. So the attendee asks, what role can courts play in ensuring AI safety, especially in Africa, considering that these technologies are often imported into our jurisdictions from international developers and challenges of cross-border litigation?
Yeah, so again, I think it also starts with the involvement, right? Because once the judiciary, let's say a court, a primary court of a county or any other jurisdiction, they're like, oh yeah, AI is great, we're going to use it, we're going to procure it, use it in our decision making, and later on they face probably cross-border litigation or something like that. So how is the judiciary in the first place? How did they assess the technology or the AI tool that they're going to use in their respective need, right? So were the judges involved in that, or the procurement team and the IT team just went ahead and procured, or the Chief Justice or the minister said, I made this person, okay, you guys, we're going to use it? No. So we really need to get people involved and be transparent. So, for example, if someone has approached the government or the court, we have an interesting AI solution, well and good. Where's the technical guy? Where's the judge who's going to use it? Where's the lawyer who's going to use it? And can we talk about the model? How does it work? Can you please explain to us in a very basic language how the model works? What kind of data you're going to collect? what kind of data are you going to feed the model, since it's now contextualized? You've bought it probably from Cuba, but it's in the context they developed, the AI developers and engineers developed it in the context of Cuba. And now they want to use it in the context of Moranga County, for example, in a court. So you need to first understand, is it going to be contextualized? Are they going to customize it, or at least tweak a few things here and there, but also understand that the model be, can they be transparent in the model? So, or sorry, transparent about the model that they're using. Now, also the exit strategy. How do you know that maybe in a few years, the company that you're using is just going to up and leave, or the business is not viable anymore and your data has been collected, and probably you still have a lot of, cases because you used that system. So maybe I see that time is running up. So mostly we need to get involved, do an impact assessment of safety, ethics, and everything the principles that we mentioned. I think it's not just theoretical, it has to be practically done by the people who are going to use, the beneficiaries, but also those who are procuring it, and also have laws and regulations that govern the procurement of AI systems in government. For private sector, it's a whole other aspect. But when it comes to government, we really need to work through the entire value chain or supply chain of AI.
Thank you so much for those insights, Stella. You are right, we are actually at the top of the hour. There's somebody who has asked a question, but I think I'm not sure why you're anonymous. I wish you were not anonymous. We'd be able to respond more comprehensively to this, because I'd be able to flag down your question and have a more comprehensive discussion on email. But as we are at the top of the hour, first of all, allow me to thank each of the participants for being here and keeping it here for the past hour and a half. Your questions have been quite comprehensive and quite insightful based on the discussions that we've been having. And to the panelists as well, on giving us very structured conversations, very insightful conversations in terms of AI governance and how it correlates with other sectors and disciplinary areas, and how generally outlining what the building of the stack for AI governance structures would ideally look like, and what's already ongoing, and the considerations that can be put in place with respect to that. So as we wrap up, just from the panelists, parting shots, very quick, particularized parting shots with respect to, from your own perspectives, based on your expertise and areas of work, how do you see AI governance systems evolving, possibly in the coming year and a half, and what specific considerations can be taken into account when thinking about regulating AI, especially from a localized perspective and an African perspective, and considering our local realities and approaches. And I will key in there that the question that was actually asked by the anonymous attendee, because it correlates in terms of making sure that we maintain the local approach and African perspective when creating our regulations and structures, as opposed to borrowing or mirroring what the West has. So yeah, we can start from Yvonne, Stella, then Nelly, then we can wrap it up.
Once again, thank you very much. And just to wrap it up, I'll be very quick, although like you said, should somebody need to build more on the anonymous center, I'm sure even Dr. Nelly and I will be happy to share. So I think one of the things that has come out is that AI, globally, AI is being termed as the fourth industrial revolution. Now, for those of us who are students of history, we know that one of the ways that Africa did not benefit greatly from the revolutions, and in fact was exploited by them, was because Africa was not at the table. And Africa was not at the conversation point of the revolution. So now that we are aware of this revolution, now that we have the capacity as Africa to be on the table and to make and formulate AI by Africa for Africa, I think it's time that, as I said earlier, instead of copying and pasting, we need to agree that as Africa, we have our own unique challenges, we have our own unique insights, we have our own unique indigenous knowledge, we have our own contribution to AI. It's time that we sit at the table in this fourth industrial revolution and not wait for someone to make a suit, transferring it to us, and then we realize that it is not fitting us. It is time for us to be involved in tailor-making the suit, and perhaps to even exactly buy the suit from abroad, but cut it and shape it to our unique African context and our own unique African culturalization. So I see AI in the next very few months, noting how fast AI moves, or in the next few years, developing rapidly. I see it now having to involve a level of our own indigenous knowledge and indigenous hubs. And I see us using it locally through our own access to the internet and literacy levels. So all I probably see is that for AI to become real and to become applicable to Africa, we have to be involved in tailor-making it, but we also have to tie it with our own unique African realities in terms of our indigenous knowledge and in terms of even our local dialects. So mine would be to also say thank you to everybody who listened in. Thank you to everybody for their kind remarks, for their questions. We hope we've done this justice. It's been a learning session, and I hope to learn more, not just even from my colleagues in the panel, but I also hope for more future interactions, but we'll keep talking about AI. Let's keep the discussion alive. As we are seeing, AI is growing very rapidly, and I know that next year, we will have different discussions on AI. So thank you very much, Florence, and everybody else. May God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Yvonne.
And I think I had some two parting shots in the chat. So I think that for me, that's my parting shot. Those are two of my favorite quotes. I have like 10, but I picked those two for today's discussion. Quotes on AI and technology.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Stella?
Yes, so I mean, without a doubt, it's going to keep growing, right? AI is going to be growing, evolving, and so on and so forth. Governance, regulation is going to be also evolving and changing over time, and we either be part of it or we're always playing catch up, right? And I think Anonymous is spot on, even though they're anonymous. Yes, he's asking right questions, but it's not rocket science. It's really in the simplicity of just do it, probably. Yeah, we don't need a lot of explanations around it. We just have to do it. And what are we supposed to do it? And I think growing, regional alignment and cross-border concerns will continue to grow, because it's very important that we all align, be it regionally, the coordination, cross-border aspects are going to keep, or challenges will keep growing. So we need to align as regions, as countries, and so on. There's also the capacity gaps that we have. They're going to be a bottleneck. If we don't address them, they'll keep growing, because we'll be catching up, and maybe we're from ChatGPT 0. whatever, and now they're at 4.05. I'm also not catching up. So meaning, if we don't address the capacity and ecosystem gaps that we have, still, the policy will not address that if we're not enforcing it. So, and there's also, of course, standardization that we talked about. If we don't as well address that, the gaps will continue growing. But I think we have all it takes to start, slowly but surely, start standardizing, having regional bodies agree, align, look at the risks that are involved, assess and mitigate them, and so on and so forth. So the regulations will keep as well accelerating, because the technology is also evolving, but we need to also be participating and have the soft ones and the hard regulations. So having laws, regulation, governance, policies, and so on is one thing. Enforcing them is another. And only if we enforce what we've put in place as policies, regulation, and laws, that's when we're going to actually see results. And that's where we'll also stop having blame games of Western colonization and so on, if we start doing ourselves, but also actually enforcing and implementing what we have agreed on as countries, as regional bodies. Yeah, so thank you very much for this session. It was insightful, even though time has caught up with us, but I think it's a continuous conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stella. And closing off with Nelly.
Yeah, Florence, I want to keep it quite short. I know the rest of the world is investing a lot on the data and the personnel so that you are developing systems that then create the need for policies. I'm sorry, what we're doing as Africa is maybe starting with the policies and then hope that that will apply to us. And that is why the anonymous attendee is asking, how do we adapt that to Africa? So for me, I just want to end with a note of, optimism and hope that, our African countries would create the room and the environment for our very own developers to just grow and also just put in resources. I know it's resource intensive. It's something that we don't have, or it's not a leverage that many of us in Africa have. But if we are to achieve those two things, for me, I think we would be at par, if not above the rest of the world. I don't know if that will be possible, but that will be my parting shot. Just create the room for those opportunities to grow and innovate, and also just put in resources in a manner that we can create an AI tool that can be applied in the rest of the world. I don't know if that will be realistic, but that is why it's optimism. With that, Florence, thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I think I've enjoyed, and thank you for our audience for sticking with us to this end. Over to you, Florence.
Thank you so much. I mean, this conversation can go on and on and on for quite some time. There's somebody in the comments who's just noted one of our key CPIT ethos when doing any kind of research or AI policy research specifically, where we define African AI as being AI developed in Africa for Africans by Africans. So I think that's a good way to end this particular session. Thank you all so much, panelists, participants, for being part of this last webinar session. Please look out for the next webinar series that will be coming up, hopefully at the beginning of the next year. Please interact with our work, our research work from our website at cipit.strathmore.org. And yes, enjoy the rest of your evening, and we look forward to having further conversations with respect to AI and governance and policy from within the continent and Kenya and the wider East African region. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, and thank you to everyone too.